Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is finding a good fit for you in terms of an employer. Because for me, finding a good match in a job is a lot like a relationship, except your salary and oftentimes your healthcare are tied to that relationship. So you want to make sure that it's not toxic. You should really vet your potential employer the same way you would vet a potential partner, or at least just take care in who you're choosing. We have an article about this now in our site, dotohire.com, but we're adding in some more information that we've kind of gathered since writing that article. And also, if you're an audiovisual person, maybe this is better for you. Great, so before we get started with giving you the tips, the first thing that you need to do is assess yourself. Assess what you need as an employee. Assess what's important to you, what your strengths are, so what kind of environment you're going to work best in, and then really assessing what your personal values are. This can be cultural or political, whatever that may be, to determine what you are looking for in a company in terms of how they impact the world. Once you've assessed everything, you can start with these 5 tips. So tip number 1 is to go to the review sites. This is definitely the most obvious way to find out more about a company. You can go to a site like Glassdoor, or I found that Indeed may be more useful for hourly workers to review some of the things that are being said about the company. Now, when you go to these sites, just like any review site that's anonymous, you need to take everything with a grain of salt. Be mindful that these are people's personal experiences, and you may have different needs than they had that just weren't being met. And of course, that people are more likely to leave a review or have strong feelings about something if it's negative, and that may play into there being more negative reviews than positive reviews, or whatever that may be. You also need to be mindful of the fact that companies will often incentivize their employees to leave good reviews and to boost their rating on the site. So you're dealing with 2 different types of bias or BS, whatever you want to call it, on the review sites, but that doesn't mean that they're not still useful. A few tips for going on these sites. Number 1, to look for patterns. Now, if you see the same thing being said about the company in most of the negative reviews, then that might be something that you note as a red flag. If you see, for example, that the company is consistently overworking but underpaying employees, if that's a consistent sentiment, then that might want to ring a bell in your head, say, okay, pause, let me digest that. The other thing to look out for are the departments or the titles of the people that are leaving reviews. Maybe it's a departmental problem and it's not a company-wide problem, and maybe it's a department that you aren't particularly interested in working in. That's not what you're going for, and that can sway whether or not you really interpret those negative reviews as something to really digest. So those are the 2 main tips there to get more of the usefulness out of the site. Now, one thing about Glassdoor in particular is that you do have to contribute to have kind of unfettered, just unlimited access to the salaries, the reviews, information about the company. If you have not ever had a job in the past, that could be a barrier for you. But if you've had any kind of work experience and you just want to drop an anonymous comment or share your salary anonymously, then you can have access to Glassdoor for I think it's a year, and be able to review all of this information pretty easily. If you've never used Glassdoor, you'll just go to glassdoor.com and you can type in, let's say, the company that you're interested in. Here I'm going to type in Amazon.com or Amazon, and you'll navigate to that company's page, and you can see everything from how many reviews they have to the salaries to the CEO score, and you can click in and get more details. One thing that you may want to do is filter down to the location for where you're going to be working and see how that impacts the reviews that are being left or salaries that are being left, to get a better idea of what you're working with. Tip number 2 is to go to the company site. This seems like a no-brainer, but you would be surprised at how many people never look at the company site for a company that they're going to interview for, or perhaps they're interested in applying to. Now, you should always be looking at the company site because you need to know what the company does before you apply or interview. But this is also a hub of all of the information that this company wants you to know about them. Of course, these sites are generally heavily biased towards the company. They are built and marketed a very specific way, but it does not mean that you can't get useful information out of them. You can get a lot of information out of them. You can find everything from the benefits they offer their employees to what the leadership and board of directors looks like, to their values and mission statements and impact that they're having on their community, some of their more personal passion projects. For smaller companies, you might not find that much information on their sites. It's really up to them to have a good marketing team for this. So very, very small startups, you may not get a lot out of there, but larger companies, you definitely will. You can contrast all of the info that you're going to find on this site with some of the info you're going to find in the other steps, such as Googling them to see what they present about themselves versus what's being said about them or reported on them, to get a better idea of if it's going to be a good fit for you. A few things that I personally look out for are, one, I always immediately go to the leadership page to see what the leadership team looks like. Then I'll go and check out the values and, of course, and just in general how navigable the site is, because for me that speaks a lot to accessibility efforts. For anyone who may not be totally comfortable navigating these sites yet, it's maybe not something you've done, I'm going to use Salesforce as an example. Salesforce has a very good site. They really care about marketing their values as well as their product. So if you go to Salesforce's site, you can easily navigate to this navigation tab company, and within that you'll see a drop down of a ton of different options ranging from their leadership to their story to their impact initiatives. So Salesforce makes this really easy to find by having it in the top navigation bar, but not all companies are going to have the company information in the top navigation bar. Maybe they're more consumer centric. You'll have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page in this instance to find these links at the bottom in a separate navigation. It's called Sitemap. And here you can generally, if you can't find it at the top of the navigation, you can find it at the bottom. A good example of this for anyone trying to figure out what I'm talking about is Warby Parker. You can't find company info at the very top, but if you scroll down, you'll be able to find all of the information that you're looking for down at the bottom of the page. Going back to Salesforce though, this is a really comprehensive look at what the company cares about. As mentioned, I always go to the leadership page first and foremost to see what the diversity looks like on these more managerial levels. So at the top of the company, what does diversity look like? Because yes, diversity at the bottom is important, but we also want to see it spread throughout. That's how we make change. So I'll go here, and here you can see what their team looks like. Rabbit hole, another great place to look is their values and what they're stating is important to them, and use that to say, okay, well, are they just making really bold statements, or are they also backing it up with data? How transparent are they being about what they're doing? And take a deep dive, especially if these things are important to you. Again, the only real note here is to be mindful of the fact that these sites have a lot of thought put into them. You have entire teams behind the designs of these sites, and they are made to make you feel a certain way and to guide you and get the information that they want you to have. So even while you're going through this, even if the company is presenting you with a lot of data, a lot of information, try to parse through that the best as you can, and remember that you're still going to need to do more research outside of this site. Talking about cyberstalking companies is making me thirsty. All right, tip number 3, Google them. Google them. Really do a deep dive. This might not work out super well for small to mid-sized companies. You still may end up just seeing a lot of content that's produced by the company. But for larger businesses, this will be pretty easy. They're gonna have a fairly large media footprint in terms of not only content related to the industry, but also content related to reporting on what the company is doing just in society or with their employees, whatever it may be. Just be mindful of where the source of whatever you're reading is coming from, if it's produced by the company, if they have strong ties to the company, or if it's a third party or unbiased entity. Take a look at that. It should help you filter through that information a little bit better. And kind of like I say in the article, this can get pretty political unless you're an apolitical person, and very personal, which is why also at the beginning of the video, it's mentioned that you should really assess your values as well, because this is where you're going to see if anything that this company does conflicts with those values. And really, if you want, start looking at things that are particularly important to you. I know for me, I want to know what the company looks like in regards to their impact on the climate or their labor practices, things like that. So dive really deep into whatever is important to you. Google is your friend in this scenario. And see, is what's being reported on them or what I'm finding lining up with what I saw on their company site? Does this line up with my values? Which of these values can I kind of trade off on that I'm okay with, etc. Tip number 4, talk. Not TikTok, like talk. Not my favorite as an introvert. Maybe if you're an introvert, it's not your favorite either. However, it's a really powerful tool in this toolkit of figuring out if a company is going to be a good place for you. And that is, of course, to talk to people who have actually worked there or who currently work there. Basically have an exploratory chat with somebody who either is in or has been in the role that you are looking to go into. Or if you can't find somebody who's been in that particular role or is in that particular role, just in the company as a whole. There are 3 ways to do a reach out like this or have an exploratory conversation. The first one is, of course, if you already know somebody at the company, have a chat with them, ask to speak with them about their experience, what the company has to offer. Maybe if you have very particular questions about things that are important to you. So maybe diversity is important to you. Ask them how they feel about the diversity initiatives at the company. Whatever that is, it's your open conversation with them. If they're not in the particular role that you are looking for, or if you just want to have more insight, then ask them to connect you with somebody who is either on the team or in the role or has been. They don't have to be a current employee. Former employees are great as well. Ask them to connect you with somebody and have that gateway into another conversation. The second thing you can do is ask a stranger. This is, of course, not something my introverted self thought of. This is something I learned from somebody else who is explaining his job search process to me, and I thought this was fascinating. So you use LinkedIn in this scenario. You'll go to LinkedIn and you can either go to the company profile and search for people and then find somebody in the role or position you're interested in and send them a connection request and let them know that you'd really be interested in talking more about their experience at the company, in that role, etc. Look, maybe you might get rejected, so send a few of these out if you can, but chances are somebody's going to be willing to give you 15 minutes of their time to discuss the job. The other way you can do this is to just put in the job title that you're interested in and use the filter by people. And from there, set an extra filter to find former employees or current employees. So people who've had that company in their LinkedIn bios at any point, and then send those connection requests from there. You may find that speaking to former employees is even better because if they left for a particular reason, you can find out more about that and might get some more insight. So take that into consideration. A third way you can do this is to actually ask for the company to facilitate a conversation or a meeting. This, of course, would only come after you've established a relationship with the recruiter, you've been through some interviews. And it's not an unheard of request to ask to speak to somebody who is in the same position that you're looking to go into to gain more insights into not only the company, but also the particular aspects of the job that you just may overlook in a description that you put on LinkedIn. I know I said there were 3. There are actually 4. And the 4th one is the most important. It's to interview the recruiter or the hiring manager. Interviews are generally oriented around behavioral questions, and you are allowed and supposed to actually ask more questions to them in this interview. It's actually supposed to be a conversation, and they're just going to gauge whether or not they like the answers to the behavioral questions. You have the opportunity to either flip some of their behavioral questions back to them, or of course ask for more information on things that you're really interested in knowing more about. Take that Salesforce data, for example, that we found on their site. One question that I would ask is, Well, I noticed that only 23% of your leadership team is female and 0% non-binary. What initiatives are you taking to improve that metric? These are completely fair questions to ask, and I've asked these questions in interviews in the past, and it went really well, and they were appreciative of my honesty in regards to what was important to me as an employee. And it just allowed me to know whether or not the company was being transparent and open to having tough conversations. So yeah, ask the questions. Be polite, of course, don't be accusatory, but ask the questions that are important to you, or just take some of the questions that they are giving you and flip them around. Okay, tip number 5 is one that is not in the article. It's one that came up when I was doing just random research and watching other creators. I cannot take credit for this tip. This one goes to Career Cultivation. Really great account if you're looking for other content related to career development. But in a video that she made, she mentioned going to socials, and that's not even something I thought about, but going to LinkedIn and socials to see what's being said, one, by everyday people about the company, but also, especially on LinkedIn, what other professionals are saying about the company, kind of what's going on. You can do these searches on Facebook, maybe even Instagram, but I'm going to show you on LinkedIn. I thought this was really cool when she did it. So she'll go to LinkedIn, type in the company name, and then filter by posts. It's a little tab that you can choose, and from there just start scrolling and see what's being said. For large companies, there's going to be a lot of information, but this is kind of like Googling, but more specific, I guess. You can see what people are actually posting when they tag the company. Maybe they just started a job and they're talking about their great experience, or maybe they left the company and they're talking about their experience there. You can also see more particular information. So here you can see that there is a lot being said about current active moves that the company is taking, either the CEO or the business. It just gives you another glimpse, another angle to get an idea of what the company is all about. And maybe you'll find some things here that you didn't find in a Google search. That's it for today. Thank you for watching another Dodo Hire video. We are trying to put out videos every 2 weeks. So like, comment, or subscribe. If you like shorter form content, or you just want to keep up to date with us on social media, you can follow us on TikTok or Instagram, both with the username at dodohire.com, or you can chat directly with us in our Discord channel. The link is below in the description. You can find this video and more articles and videos on our site, dodohire.com. If you have anything you're curious about, you can submit a question either by leaving a comment here if you're on YouTube, or by emailing us info@dodohire.com, or if you want, send us a DM.